Complicated Conversation with Brian D. Schultz by Beverly Atzma. This complicated conversation will contain 5 parts, including 1. Brian Schultz's life and career history, 2. Other scholars and theories who have influenced Brian Schultz's work, 3. Brian Schultz's recurring topics, themes, and theories, 4. The significance of Brian Schultz's research to the field of curriculum and instruction, 5. The impact of Brian Schultz's research on my own teaching. Life and career history. Brian D. Schultz is currently a professor and department chair of teacher education at Miami University in Oxford, Ohio. Prior to his work at Miami University, he was the Educational Inquiry Department Chair at Northeastern Illinois University in Chicago. He earned his bachelor's degree in psychology and master's degree in experiential and elementary education at Miami University. He holds a doctorate in curriculum and instruction from the University of Illinois at Chicago. Schultz speaks nationwide on democratic and progressive classroom ideals, and his work has focused on using students as a source of curricula. He bases much of his work on his experience teaching students from the Cabrini Green neighborhood when he taught 5th grade in the Chicago public schools. I am attracted to Brian D. Schultz as a scholar because of his experiences engaging underprivileged elementary students through student-directed content and interest. I also teach 5th grade students who are economically disadvantaged, and although my students do not live in apartments, they are mostly housed in a nearby overpriced trailer park. The further they live from the entrance of the park, their homes become increasingly and notoriously in disrepair, and it is a high crime district. There are no regulations for the number of occupants within a home, and several students live in overcrowded single-wide trailers. I was interested to learn how Schultz developed relationships with the community and learned alongside his students in the pursuit of social justice in the classroom. Brian D. Schultz is a noted author, co-author, and prolific writer of books and articles about curriculum and education. He has published several articles regarding democratic practices in the classroom, student-centered teaching, multicultural education, action-focused curriculum, and teacher education. Theoretical influences. Brian D. Schultz has been influenced by the ideas of John Dewey, who first published The Child and the Curriculum in 1902. Additional scholars in progressive education such as Rudolf Steiner, Maria Montessori, Caroline Pratt, and L. Thomas Hopkins build upon the theology of Jean-Jacques Rousseau, who has described lessons to be learned from children before they are distorted by adult society. Schultz often cites Michael W. Apple regarding ideas about democratic teaching. Schubert and Schultz, 2015, refer to Apple and Bean, 2007, when they explain that although educational mission statements are often offered as democratic, top-down policy mandates are autocratic and allow little discretionary decision-making by local educational leaders, teachers, and especially by students. Schultz and Banks use Apple's explanation that urban students are not perceived as students that value their teaching, and schooling reinforces the notion of cultural reproduction. Schultz 2007b proposes that to create a classroom climate that honors the learner, educators must throw out the notion that there is official or high-status knowledge, and students must have access to a wide range of information and the right of those varied opinion to have their viewpoints heard. Also has been influenced by and cites frequently the work of William Ayres. Ayres writes primarily on social justice, democracy in education, and the cultural contexts of schooling. Schultz acknowledges Ayres' claim that a common belief regarding urban students is that they are nothing more than deficits and pathologies. Schultz explains Ayer's proposal that we reimagine schools with students at the center so that we can deliberate with students about curriculum and schooling and in turn affect societal change. This democratic curriculum described by Ayers reflects a commitment to working with students to reach full humanity and promote socially responsive citizens who become more powerfully and self-consciously alive. Recurring topics, themes, and theories published by Schultz include democratic curriculum, students as curriculum, and teacher culpability in justice-oriented teaching. He expresses a democratic curriculum as he desires to take the curriculum away from the scripted lesson plans and give it to the students to develop their unique interests. By democratizing curriculum, students practice skills that are decompartmentalized by pursuing information about real-world problems that they are interested in solving. In doing so, students fulfilled content standard requirements demonstrating that curriculum could be more than something merely offered or imposed on teachers and students without their input or advice. Democratic curriculum provides a freedom that fulfills students as individuals and promotes socially responsive citizens. Schultz and Banks cites Nogari's contention that possible solutions to issues related to achievement gaps, school safety and discipline, as well as student motivation might be remedied by looking to actual children in classrooms. Schultz describes his experience in democratic curriculum at Byrd Community Academy as having an impact as evidenced by multiple unexpected measures as well. He states that standard test scores of most students increased over the previous year, discipline problems simply did not exist, and attendance was a sky-high 98%. Students as curriculum. Schultz asks, how can we understand the complexities in the lives of students as they meet the educational experiences school provide? He explains that because students use their own culture, ethnicity, and language to mediate the information presented in the classroom, and they learn from one another through their relationships, one must conclude that the student, at least in part, is the curriculum. School is more than a place to be taught and learn information. Students live the curriculum, and their health, ability, geography, and affluence or poverty has a massive impact on how students reflect and somatically respond to an imposed curriculum. When writing about their experiences in the classroom, Schultz and Banks refer to student lore as a form of educational inquiry, where students and teachers seek to learn from their own experiences in classrooms. When school becomes related to the students' lives, kids want to be in school and are motivated by what happens in the classroom. What are teachers culpable for in justice-oriented teaching? The term social justice curricula can be considered a trigger for teachers and administrators. Although justice-oriented teaching can be inclusive to teachers and students who learn alongside each other in spaces that are culturally responsive, sensitive, and relevant, academic rigor must be maintained and teachers will be questioned by administrators, parents, and students. Teachers must be proactive about relationships with colleagues and parents and maintain open communication with administration about ideas and rationale. Schultz describes extensive strategies to create allies by detailing the work done in the classroom and keeping an open door policy so that others could observe the enthusiasm and learning happening in the classroom. Consistent communication with parents through newsletters, co-authored narratives in report cards, and phone calls also help to promote positive relationships with students and families. Caprice Pruitt explains, my mama really cares about what I'm learning, why I'm learning it, and what she can do to help support me. Justice-oriented teaching, however, involves curricula where political, economic, and social matters are not removed from the curriculum, but instead become a part of how classroom curriculum gets enacted. In our current academic culture, The role of teachers as facilitators and students as consumers of others' knowledge, creating a potentially politically charged classroom, takes a risk on the part of the teacher. Additionally, some may raise concerns about the appropriateness of the content of some in the news issues. Schultz and Pearson, however, argue that if students have the inclination to name such issues, they also ought to be provided with the opportunities to explore such topics in the classroom. Brian Schultz's contributions to the field of curriculum. Schultz's research is in contradiction to the current field of curriculum instruction's notion that skill acquisition, standards-based approaches, and decontextualized learning of the basics must occur before students can engage in knowledge acquisition or knowledge production. They dare to imagine an alternative to an often scripted, listless curriculum promoted by policymakers to help teachers identify openings and opportunities to shift from rigid curricula to inquiry-based and emergent forms of action-focused curricula through student-centered democratic classrooms. In an academic climate that insists teachers be politically neutral, Schultz and Euler encourages teachers to stimulate their students to become involved in issues of social action and learn the skills and values of participatory democracy. Teachers who participate in democratic classrooms must have a thorough understanding of pedagogical authority, and they must be willing to share that authority with their students and follow their leads when deciding what knowledge is important. By allowing curriculum to be taken beyond the four walls of the classroom, however, teachers and students lose the protection of contrived lesson plans, and the interaction with the real world can be problematic. By participating in the democratic, politicized, action-oriented learning, students are allowed to see for themselves their multitude of abilities, intelligences, imaginations, and worth. As stakeholders and policymakers begin to recognize the need for social and emotional learning, relevant teaching, and the use of teaching strategies that go beyond basic skills in the classroom, Schultz has provided a solution to the decontextualizing of these attributes by giving students voice to the decisions made about what knowledge is important to learn. Educators can gain impact by giving up authority and trusting students to make decisions about their own learning and trusting teachers to have the pedagogical prowess to guide them through the process. What have I learned from Brian D. Schultz's scholarly contributions? I have learned to question the research and wonder what would happen if I listened to my students. In my recent studies of how social attributes moderate academic achievement, it has become evident that adding these skills to the list of standards that teachers need to cover only confounds the decontextualized nature of education. Didion et al. States that the role of instruction enhances motivation processes, but also focuses on the need to explicitly teach skills associated with causal action. They go on to explain the significance of self-determination as related to reading achievement, including several component skills: decision-making, problem-solving, goal-setting, self-advocacy, positive attributions of efficacy and expectancy, and self-regulation. After reading Schultz's experiences in student-centered democratic classrooms, I question the need to explicitly teach these skills. A contrary theory is that the self-determination skills are a byproduct of social justice and relevant teaching and learning. The push in my county for using such strategies as teacher clarity and meaningful feedback becomes contextualized in student-driven curriculum. Didion et al. Claim that it is imperative that foundational self-determination skills are taught in elementary grades so that individuals with LD will develop skills that will empower them as adults. Implementing the practice of practical inquiry through action-focused student-centered learning is a natural environment for building self-determination skills, and I desire to build these practices in my classroom. I feel confined by my district curriculum, and like Stephanie Pearson, I see an improvement in the lessons that have open-ended inquiry-based nature, but they are still somewhat canned lessons, removed from authentic experiences, designed to teach students skills for their future lives rather than allowing students to learn through actual experiences in the present. I am challenged to reimagine my curriculum as student-driven, but feel ill-equipped to proceed on my own. My temptation would be to dabble with trials of the practice and not start with year-long projects. I have to learn how to balance the countdown to milestones outline that I'm required to submit each week, explaining my plan to prepare students for the upcoming high-stakes test, with my desire to have students truly invested in their learning. How can I balance the accountability I have to my boss with the accountability I feel for my students? Why is this a question of one or the other? Shouldn't we all want what is best for our students? Students at my school live their lives in savage inequality. They lack academic support, access to technology, educational experiences outside of the school building, and provision of basic needs. However, my students also have a community much like what Paris Banks describes as like a big family. We all have each other's backs and really do care about each other a lot. My students have street intelligences that include self-management and caring for one another. During digital learning, one of my students with the lowest academic achievements was observed providing meals and caring for younger siblings while trying to attend to a lesson online. As teachers, we do not know the extent of the responsibilities at home, but we need to value those assets in the classroom through self-directed learning. My first step in making this happen in my classroom is to learn to listen deeply and carefully about what they have on their minds. Our "How was your weekend?" and "What are you doing this weekend?" conversations are opportunities for us to build community in the classroom. However, taking their concerns and implementing student-driven curricula is going to be a bold move. I truly hope that spectacular things happen along the way.